Hello, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. It's lovely to have you gracing me with your presence. No presents. But when you have a set of people living around you, I don't know, but I've always grown up in a city, man. I've always grown up with people around me. It's a weird setup, like the whole idea of living next to people, not just living. Living, of course, let's not go down that philosophical route. But I don't know, like you have these, like the irritations start with you and your surroundings. Like something small, you bump your toe into a chair which was left pulled out, and you're like, fucking motherfucker. And or if you have a or you have something that pisses you off, you don't get your way, and just multiply that by, like, in where I live, I think Bangalore's got a population of close to 10 million people. That's a lot of people with a lot of irritations. And the irritations are different. Like for someone, they're like, fuck me up the ass, like whatever it may be, right? I don't know if that's an annoyance or an admiration that you have in your partner, but I'm just saying it's so varied, right? Like for someone who's got money, it's like, oh man, I didn't get that fucking Rolex that I ordered. Like, it's sold out. Or someone's like, oh shit, my tampon got stolen at the coffee shop. I don't know why the fuck anyone would steal. But yeah, there are probably people is like, oh shit, I spilt my latte. I need a tampon. Who knows? It takes all to make this world. By the way, maybe a good idea instead of, well, that'd be interesting, right? Like in this whole equality debate, or in this whole idea of, women's problems are real problems, like replace tissues with tampons. It just soaks up the shit better. I don't know. Supposedly, I have never used one. Right. Or maybe men should be allowed to use tampons if they have diarrhea. Who knows? I'm just saying these are possibilities. Now, the thing is, coming back to my earlier point, it's very interesting when people have so many different issues, and you have different kinds of human beings, some cruel bastards who want to cause pain to other human beings or to animals and to hurt them. Or then you have some people who want to save them, and then some people who want to do all sorts of other things with them. I'm just talking about how do we coexist. It's crazy that we haven't wiped each other out already. I'm just saying food preferences, to noise level preferences, to music preferences, to smell preferences, to looks preferences. There's so many things that are just fundamentally, as human beings, we're designed to like or dislike, and or get interested by or irritated by, or find sensual, or find absolutely disgusting, loathing. And I don't know, like, the people say we are supposed to be tribal fucking people, but how? Like, wouldn't it just be easier if we just were told, like in school, wear a uniform and fucking come to school, and you can't wear anything besides the prescribed uniform, or you cannot bring this food because that upsets the cycle of what the school has prescribed. And it just seems to work if you started from a young age. Like, you can't, no, your preferences don't matter, your irritations don't count. It's only what the big mind, the big controlling power decides for you, and just fucking go about it. Because otherwise, it seems like this whole freedom of choice and freedom of expression, it's a bit, we need to earn it. I think we need to swap it a little bit. I think the people who are living in these regimes like North Korea or Iran, like Iran, of course. Look at that. Look at what the fuck's happening there. It's crazy, right? That they are have these moral police going around telling women that, and it's not like the women that are wearing bikinis and walking around, right? They're actually wearing a full, I think, the hijab outfit. And even within that, these motherfuckers are like, no, you have to tuck this crease here so your camel toe, the imagined camel toe is hidden behind its actual camel toe. Some crazy shit. And they actually beat up a person and killed her because their morality was offended, or their perceived idea of morality was offended. What a bunch of pricks. And now you have these women and girls and older women and across generational kind of uprisal, and then you have these morons are like, no, we'll come down hard on it, and fucking stupid bastards that's going on. So I'm just saying that society, when they will see freedom, will appreciate it a lot more than, someone like in the US, where they're like, oh, it really offended me that he didn't wear a mask, or oh my God, he's an anti. It's just when you are given too much freedom for too long, you kind of become a bitch about it. Like, you start whining and you start abusing your freedom, and you start not abusing in that way, but you start kind of not appreciating it and become a dick about your freedom, and just be like, yeah, find the pettier things to get upset about, to kind of take your, it's kind of like if you get sex too easily, you kind of take it for granted, and then you kind of are like, oh, yuck, blowjobs. I'm so done with that. I want bondage. I want someone to put a glass dildo up my ass while they sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, How I Wonder How You Are, whatever the song is. You just start becoming more picky and more finicky. So I think every so often we need to sort of have a reset and kind of reverse the roles. Give North Koreans the rights of Americans, and give North Americans a regime like Kim Jong-il or Wang Jong-pung, or yeah, people say Donald Trump was a tyrant. No, you haven't seen fucking tyrants. Yeah, like Putin tries telling all the Russians, oh, no, the war is going great, but we want to take you now and show you the good scenic route of Ukraine and the lovely war on Kiev, and you must come out there. Yes, all healthy men. Yes, no legs, no arms. Please come in. Yes. The conscription. Yes, it is actually a holiday. All expenses paid. One-way ticket to the border of. Yes, you have the Donbass. You have the that's a country, by the way, or a city, and then you will go down to the other part, and we will build a bridge, and you will have lovely time, come back with good savings. And fucking they bolted. Russian guys like, I don't fall for your bullshit. I am leaving on good. I am leaving on good time. Double step, let run. Yeah. It's crazy when an entire country has like 5 names. The conscription must be like, yeah, Ivan, yeah, 1,000 fucking people right there in one village. So, yeah, it's crazy. But I don't know, man. I don't know. I feel too much of something is taken for granted, then people kind of get fucking annoying. Like, yeah. Anyhow, that's just something I thought about. Let me know if you have any thoughts on the issue. Yeah, you can stay in touch, or you can get in touch with me at SoapyRao Show. That's one word, SoapyRaoshow @gmail.com. Anyway, my guest on today's episode, not more importantly, Dr. Femi Ogunjimmi. He is an author, he's a speaker, and of course, he's not a speaker, he's a human being who speaks, not a speaker like, oh, is that a new kind of output product, speaker, Ogunjinmi, who is installed in bar? No, he's a speaker, motivational speaker. He's his focus is on relationships, one between couples, between humans. No, I wouldn't say couples, it could be man, boy, not boy, man, girl. No, man, woman. Don't say man, girl. That puts the wrong idea. But also he works on relationships with yourself. And he's put out a few books to help you. And on today's episode, he joins me to talk about the idea of love, the idea of looking within to begin the journey of looking without, and a whole lot more. Lovely chat with a very insightful human being, and I'm sure you'll have a lovely time listening to this episode of the SoapyRao Show. As always, I appreciate you tuning in and listening week in, week out. Till next time, goodbye, God bless, take care of yourselves. Cheers. Dr. Femi Ogunjimmi, welcome to the podcast. How are you this evening, sir?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me, Sandeep.
It's my pleasure. And well, I want to ask you something which I usually get to know about your background, where you're from, where you live. But I want to understand this, and maybe it is an interesting thing in this present state. But since you work with relationships and work on people's relationships, How do you describe, in your experience, the idea of love?
Well, that's a deep question.
Let's go.
It's a deep question whenever we talk about relationship, but specifically the word love. It's
Mm,
complicated. It's uh, it's a complex matter
mhm,
because most people have been taught that love is all emotional based. It's something that you can really not describe on its own. It's just based on how you feel. And sometimes we can confuse our feelings with lust
mhm, mhm.
because, especially at the initial stage of meeting someone, the first initial feelings may not be love. It may actually be lust.
Yeah.
I've tried to define love as something that requires you to have wisdom
Mm,
and knowledge to be able to identify if this is love or not. And there will be scenarios and situations that will give a glimpse of what really love is. For an example, sacrifice. If you are seeing sacrifice from the relationship or from the person, then that can give you an idea of what love is. But so it requires based on just your feelings of how I feel about this person, because your feelings can actually be lost until you start opening your eyes and using your intellect to dissect what the situation is and not confuse it with lust. So it's a very deep one, but it requires wisdom, it requires knowledge, and not just based on feelings. It has to be action based.
it almost sounds like pleasure and the fun things are lust, but the more serious things like compromise, sacrifice, it's almost like love is boring. Like, I get
Yeah.
exactly what you mean, because like when you're in a relationship, um, the first few months, as many might call it, the honeymoon phase, when you kind of go on these dates, you go on these meals, you go on these holidays, you kind of explore each other's, especially the physical aspect of each other's, what you have to, what's on offer, with what a person is willing to give up, is all not love. But when you kind of go past that and you kind of discover what the person is, well, isn't on display, like what they kind of are hiding, their the skeletons in the closet, and so I want to understand, in today's day and age, when a lot is on show, but a lot of the same at the same time, a lot of it is the highlights that you want people to see, because with social media, you kind of cherry pick what your life looks like on a virtual platform. How is it? So what are you observing with people willing to show, and then also when it goes past that stage and they kind of meet and they have to settle down, can they continue that virtual facade, or does it go beyond that? And then what is the experience like once the kind of the veneer of social media is gone?
I think social media has played a major role in how people view a relationship
Mm,
because folks only show their highlights,
mm,
their best version of themselves on social media. They show themselves either when they are going on a date, at a restaurant, when they are laughing with their partner, when they are smiling, when they are taking beautiful pictures that they've already photoshopped.
yeah,
They've
yeah.
had all the different effects on it. So they're not showing the downside. They're not showing the bad times. And you can't have a relationship that's just based on good times.
Mm,
There is always going to be the bad times, the downtime, the the sad moments when everything is not really happy.
mm,
So, but people are not ready to show that because not everyone wants to see that.
mm,
And not everyone wants to know about your sad story, your sappy story. It's like, what is that doing for us? It's like we are all motivated by the good times. We're all motivated by the nice pictures, the
mm,
nice stories, right? So it has really affected how, especially singles or folks that want to date, that whatever they've seen from other couples have now become their blueprint of
mm,
what the expectations will be from what they are meeting. And it's no, you can't compare me to a guy who has been married for 30 years, the
Yeah.
kind of sacrifice and the knowledge that he has. If I'm just getting married, then you got to treat me as a newbie. I don't,
Yeah.
I don't have the manual for marriage, right? I don't have all the intel and information on marriage. But if you are comparing me to somebody who is showing their best self, their loving relationship with their kids, it's not that, and I'm not that person either. Okay, so
Mm.
you got to treat your relationship and treat your partner like it's your partner. You got to get to know who your partner is, what they like, what they don't like, who they are. So you got to understand your partner, but not treat them as other people's highlights or other people's relationship that we see on social media. So I believe social media has played a major role in the conflict and the issues that people are having in their relationship and the expectations that they bring into the whole mix.
Because it must be difficult for both people, right? Like for the person who's being compared and for the person who's comparing him or herself, because there's a certain kind of standard or a certain set of expectations that they try to live up to, but that might not be their experience or what they genuinely want out of their life, right? No, it's and how does someone, because a lot of it starts, okay, of course there are, a relationship involves two people or more depending on what relationship you're looking at, but what is, I mean, the essential thing starts with your relationship with yourself, and what is something that a person comes across when, and you mentioned something a few minutes back when we spoke about when you spoke about love, is this idea of wisdom. Is with this information age, there's so much knowledge at your fingertips. How does someone, or at least in your experience talking to people, when do you, or rather, what is the approach of even starting with yourself? Because I believe that's where it all begins and ends, right?
Absolutely. It all begins with you. It's a
Mm.
personal journey. It's a personal development. How
Mm-hmm.
matured are you? How secured are you? How are you not letting your past experiences affect your current relationship or the expectations that you bring into the relationship? So
Mm-hmm.
it's a personal journey, it's a personal development, because if you can become a better individual, then ultimately you would become a better person for your partner. I have a program that I call Becoming the Man She Wants,
Mm.
which is geared towards married men. And I phrase that title as becoming the man she wants, in the way that if you can become a better person, ultimately you will become a better person for her. You will
Mm.
be the person that she desires. And it's important that it's also both ways, just like it's expected for men, it's also expected for women. But it's a personal journey. You got to understand communication skills. You got to understand how to listen with empathy. You got to understand how to practice forgiveness. You got to understand apology, kindness. You got to understand the love language of your partner. I mean, these are all personal things and personal information that you have to really educate yourself about and get to
Mm.
know. So the more knowledge you have, the more information and intel you have, the better you will be able to be suitable for another person.
Yeah, that makes I think a lot of difference when you are willing to sort of take that ownership, right? I mean, I wouldn't say ownership's the right word, but take that. But if you take that idea of working on yourself, right? But there's that sort of introduces the idea that it never ends, that you're constantly trying to become better, and then there is this idea of you're working towards something, and the idea of the relationship is that it's always never good enough for your partner or good enough for yourself. But how, what is the purpose of a relationship? Like, is it to sort of to procreate? I mean, of course, I'm also introducing this idea now of same-sex couples. We have the idea of new ways of dating. You have the new idea of the way people look at marriage, but essentially, at its core, a relationship is supposed to bring out the idea of nurturing, the idea of happiness, the idea of companionship. But these things aren't static, right? The people change, and now the idea of divorce has become more common. The idea of people not committing their life, but just being with each other and then moving on to open marriages, whatever the words. So at its core, what is the idea, and maybe why did we look at the concept of a monogamous relationship as the standard?
Yeah, I believe the purpose of relationship is multifaceted. There's multiple purpose for it, and people can choose what their purpose for going into a relationship and enduring the ups and downs and the challenges of it. One of the reasons or purpose that I could share about relationship is to become a better version of yourself.
Okay, so
And
there's a
there is no
selfish
way you
angle
can
over there.
become.
Yeah.
It's a selfish angle. At the same time, it's not really ultimately selfish angle, right? Because in the sense that if I'm a better version of myself, I can be a better person for you. I can show up for you.
Yeah.
I can't give what I don't have. I can't give the love I don't have. I can't give the joy that I don't have. If I don't have enough energy, I can hang out with you. Like I can pour into you. So ultimately is that if I'm better, then I will be good for you. But if I'm not better, of a better version of me, then I will be a worse version of you. And the funniest thing is I can be a better version just by myself. I have to be in a relationship with somebody who sees me completely, who sees my vulnerabilities, my weaknesses, who sees my good and bad times, and be able to correct me and identify the areas of my weakness or areas of my improvement.
That's brilliant.
So,
Yeah. Because you can't sometimes see it yourself. Yeah.
You can't see it yourself. And we all walk in this world masking who we are. We don't want to show our wounds. We don't want to show our scars.
Why
We don't
is
want to
that
let people know.
Why is that? Because, sorry, everyone talks about authenticity, being your real self, bring your real self. But at the same time, it's almost the opposite happening, right?
Yeah, because your real self you may feel that you are not adequate. Your real self is not adequate. And you may not even see an example of your real self out there.
Yeah.
Or you may be in an environment where your real self has always been criticized from your childhood. So it has affected you. You've developed trauma based on that. So you don't want to show people your real self. You don't want to be criticized. You don't want people to identify whatever you are saying that might be wrong. You don't have the confidence about it, the security about it. So you've gone through trauma and traumatic situations whereby you have been suppressed of your real identity. So you don't come out showing who you really are. So you hide yourself and you become somebody who you really not. So that's one of the reasons why people are not being authentic, or probably even being criticized for who they are, and they can't really stand up for themselves, or they've not really identified what their true identity is.
But doesn't that seem to be more what people are expected to play to? That's sort of the standard now with, I don't want to keep coming back to social media, but with dating apps, of course, there's been some form of dating assistance when it comes to either in India, the arranged marriage system, or you look at Match.com, or you look at Tinder, Bumble, etc., etc. The medium keeps changing, but even the sense of, I'm sure every culture has its drawbacks or highlights depending on what you want to sort of look for. When you're looking for a partner, you hear some horror stories. At the same time, you hear some miraculous things that make you fall in love. And of course, there are stereotypes of relationships that are portrayed in the movies and in various other sort of forms of entertainment. But it's so nice to understand this idea that if you are with someone that you can really lay yourself bare to, that sort of helps you look at what your strengths are and work on that and say, you know what, these are my weaknesses, I accept it, I move on from it. But it's not really what is going on in these things, because it's almost like dating / marriage / relationships has become a commodity that people are manipulating for their benefit. But for a person sitting right now at a time where we're the most connected in the world, feeling lonely as hell with post-pandemic, post-lockdown, etc. What is how does someone make sense of any of this, right? And a relationship, I don't want to sort of stick specifically to like a husband wife or husband husband or wife wife, but I'm saying specifically to the idea of finding or connecting with another human being.
Is your question addressing how can people overcome the challenges that we are in post-pandemic?
I suppose, yeah. I mean, that's one of it. I don't know. It became more of a thought than a question. I apologize, but it's the idea of connecting to another human being. Because, okay, let me sort of go beyond and make it more confusing, since I already have. Is this? No, I just get confused with this idea, right? Like you want to belong to some sense, right? And now you hear the noise in the world about nationality. You hear about politics, you hear about all these things, religion, and everyone's claiming that come be a part of us, be a part of this community, be a part of this community that makes you highlight your strength or highlight this aspect of yourself, whether it's gender, whether it's sexuality, whether it's religion, whether it's nationality. But at the same time, how connected are people within this group is maybe a question. And second, or third or fifth, I don't know by which point I lost you at, is what is this idea of connecting to another human being?
I mean, I think connecting to another human being is fundamentally based on so many factors that you already identified, like the culture, the tradition, the religion, politics, right? It's all based on that. Those are some of the foundations of your attraction to someone who can align with your views or values when it comes to politics. You guys belong to the same political party, or you guys belong to a polarized party, then you guys gonna be having arguments in your relationship, okay?
Yeah.
Because we're bringing politics in. Or do you belong in the same culture where at least you will understand the same language? You understand the same traditions and the norms for that culture.
Yeah.
So that there are unspoken words or unspoken gestures, or the way we speak to each other, or the way we respect each other. Versus if you were to marry somebody that's outside your culture, then that forces you to learn about that person's culture, or that might even create conflict, because the way we do in our culture is not the way you do in your culture. The way we approach this matter is not the way you approach that matter. The way we do marriage ceremony is not the way you guys do marriage ceremony. I mean, there's so many underlying situations and thoughts behind that. So people definitely want to identify with a particular either culture, a particular religion, for compatibility. Or if you don't really need to marry somebody from the same culture or the same religion if you don't want to, but you must have an open mind to explore, to learn, and understand what that culture or that person's creed is, so that you can ultimately be on the same page and not allowing your differences to create problems in your relationship. Because the more differences you have, the more problems you're gonna have to face. The more challenges you're gonna have. That's the reality that I want people to take away from it. The more differences you have in your relationship, the more challenges you're gonna have. Because just even if you are from the same culture, the same background, you still have two different experiences. Especially, if you went to these different schools, you see things differently, you read things differently, you've had past relationships, all those things will definitely form what your thought process will be in that relationship. So by even our own nature as a man versus woman, we are different. We are different, and you got to learn what makes a woman, and then the woman must learn what makes a man, and you yourself as a man, you must know who you are. It takes time to really know who you really are. So take all that into consideration, and then you are not adding on top of it other differences. So it's a real deal situation. it's really challenging to be in a relationship, but you want us to be smart about it and not be led with emotions, and also understand that all these other factors we've laid down are basically what constitutes what the attraction could be and what might make a good relationship.
Yeah, because it's interesting you mentioned this idea of just the basic difference is the starting point. But like a lot of people now are traveling. They go settle away from home. They either go abroad to study. They go away from their home to get a job, and then there's this idea of marriage for convenience or a relationship for whatever reason. And it's so strange. Like I when I lived in America, so you're in college and you're meeting people, and then it's this idea of, oh wow, cool, I'm gonna find a partner, or I'm gonna hook up with someone, and then you realize very quickly that it's, yeah, while it's fun, it's great, and it's enjoyable, but beyond that, you kind of, even if you try to scratch the surface about the person's background, um, it's such a huge story that you're bringing to this person and that person's bringing to you. And many people, and including me maybe, is you don't want to start that story until there's a commitment. Because imagine, with everyone you meet, you start that story and you kind of, I mean, I don't know. Again, it's fascinating to me, right? Like when you meet someone and you say it's a guy or girl, depending, and you kind of call them your roommate, you call them a friend, and then the moment the pressure of not calling them your partner isn't there, you kind of automatically start sharing more. But the moment you say, okay, I have to find someone to date, or someone I'm going to settle down, it's almost like there's this barrier which automatically comes up, like, no, I'm going to wait a second. And is that something that is because you want to, is it because of self-preservation, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think the pressure comes once you trying to label something, right?
Mm,
When you are not allowing friendship to be the precedence of the relationship.
mm,
If you allow friendship to be the precedence of the relationship, then you lower your guard. Then
yeah,
you are not pressured, right? Because all you are looking for is somebody just to connect with, somebody who understands you, who you understand the person. You are not judgmental. You're not criticizing each other. You take the person for who they really are, and you value that friendship. And there is ultimately trust is going to be built from that on. But the moment where you see somebody and the first thing that comes to mind is, I'm attracted to this person, I want to pursue relationship, then at that moment you've already put up some type of pressure.
mm,
And at that point, you are trying to be your best version. That pressure gives you it gives you into that thinking mode of, I gotta come correct, I
mm,
gotta look correct, I
yeah,
gotta speak in the right way. And when you are in that kind of situation, your best version doesn't really come out. You are sometimes even nervous, right? You don't show up to be who you really are, and sometimes you can screw up that date, okay, because
yeah, yeah.
you have
More
so
often
much
than
in your
not.
mind. More often than not, you will screw up, and then because you have so many stories in your head, you have so many things going on, playing, like, okay, what is this person expecting me to say? How is this
Mm,
person expecting me to talk? How should I look, right? And when you have all that analysis going on in your head, you ended up saying the wrong thing, or you ended up appearing not in the right way. And sometimes even fabricating stories that is not true,
yeah,
because you feel like that's what the person really wants to hear.
yeah,
And to be real, that's not what the person really wants to hear. The person wants to really know who you are. So I think what you said is true. There is this pressure and that comes, and the guard is up, but it's not the best. And that's why I tell and I advise single folks that you want to start on friendship. It's in the friendship that you're not nervous. It's in the friendship that you show who you really are, and the person can take you for who you really are or not. You know
mm,
who is for you or not. You know who is for you or not. So, and nobody's under pretense. You really know the
yeah.
person, and the person really knows you.
There's
So
a sense of
the person knows you.
comfortable, kind of a comfortable energy with each other to kind of then take it to the next stage, right?
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely.
But you know, the interesting thing I find is this desperation not to be alone. And where does that come from? Is it a very sort of ancient human thing? Because also maybe you can sort of take me through this if you've come across it in your experiences. We hear a lot about, like, before, like many thousands of years back, there was this idea of the tribe, right? You have to belong to the tribe, and in the tribe looked after itself. It wasn't like a husband and wife, or a wife and a wife, or whatever the arrangement was, but it was, the tribe had children, everyone looked after the kids, and the tribe sort of looked after itself. But now we've broken down the unit to smaller and smaller arrangements, whether it's husband and wife, or whether it's the family, or whether it's a larger family. But what is this idea of, I think, two things, right? One is being alone, or rather the fear of being alone, and more importantly, what that represents of not being accepted, not fitting in. And then if you want to extend that thought to this idea of when you're with someone, the fear of abandonment, or the fear of being left for someone better, or the idea of jealousy and envy and insecurity. So I know it's a bit broad, but these things kind of in my mind are connected. So maybe if I'm totally off, you could correct me, but otherwise, maybe can you talk about that?
Yes, I think first of all, I would like to say being alone and loneliness, they are two different things, right?
Mm.
Even though we didn't talk about loneliness, but I want to bring that to the
Yeah, for sure.
conscience of people. Being alone is a physical state,
Mm.
meaning that I'm by myself. There's nobody physically next to me.
Yeah.
Being lonely is a state of mind.
Nice. Yeah.
You may not be, you may have somebody with you next to you. You may not be alone, but you can actually be lonely. You can be married, you're not alone, but you can actually be lonely because it's a state of mind. It's like that person is really not even there in the first place. Okay. So if we're now talking about being alone, the fact that people don't want to just be by themselves, I think is something that has been drilled down to our subconscious level and the creation of the world, meaning that we all come from two people, a
Mm.
man and a woman that came together. And when we are birthed into that kind of family, we see two people running the family. We
Yeah.
see that they're not alone, right? You see that them supporting one another, hang out
Yeah.
together, speak to each other, decide on what's going to happen to the children, decide on life together. So I think we've seen the sense of belonging, having some tribe of, some type of little community within the construct of a family, right? Then we can expand that to the tribe that you are talking about, a large community and all that. But ultimately, it still boils down to no one is an island. No one is just physically there.
Yeah.
You are born into at least people working together. So I think fundamentally and from the foundation of the world, we've seen that people are, always having some type of partnership,
Mm.
happening. And from that, as a kid, you grow up to learn that from your parents that one day I need to get married because I've seen what is happening in my home with my
Yeah.
parents.
Yeah.
So that drills down to the subconscious level of kids. And most people, if you really want to train their minds, you train their minds of a kid from when they are young, because at that point in time, everything they see from their parents becomes their blueprint of the kind of life that they want to live.
Yeah.
So it's something that we've seen growing up, and to the point where by now it's almost changing to some extent, in the sense of not every woman or every man now desires to follow that track or societal track of I finished college, I want to get married, or I
Yeah.
need to be in a relationship. Some people are now exploring their independence, their own freedom, and say, no, I don't need to get married. I'm going to be by myself. I'm just going to focus on my career and my
Yeah.
dreams and my goals. And I'm fine. Just probably get a puppy, get a dog, get a cat, get animals, right? And they're fine with that.
Yeah.
So even though there's companionship in that as well, you're not really alone. So
Yeah.
You still have some animals, keeping you engaged.
Yeah.
So, just to uh, conclude on that, I think it's been something that it's from childbirth. It's from how we grew up, and we don't want to be alone. We really want to, and there's nothing wrong with that because you can't do life alone, regardless.
Yeah.
If even you are not married, you need some type of community. You need some
Yeah.
type of tribe. You need to belong to some even like we see that even in different religion as well. The religion is just not religion. The church or the mosque, they will have some type of group, some smaller
Mm.
groups
Yeah.
that they want people to be part of, so that because people go through life. Life is hard. Life is hard. Life is challenging. You are battling through mental depression. Everything is coming at you at once.
Yeah.
You lose today, some tomorrow you win. Sometimes you are confused. So at times you need somebody to talk to you. You need somebody to encourage you. You need somebody to guide you. You need somebody to motivate you. You need that. You need to have a shoulder to cry on. Yes, you may be trying to be tough all the time, but you need somebody to just be like, what, I got you. I understand what you are going through, and not judge you, and they can listen to you, they can empathize with you. So sometimes that's what we really need and we are looking for in a relationship, because it's hard for us to go through life by ourselves,
Yeah. But can you tell me a little bit more about this sense, because you probably have come across a lot of it, where miscommunication or misinterpretation or misunderstanding can be the cause of or preconceived notions, if you want to call it, like a certain people coming into certain relationships, of course, the romantic type or even the non-romantic type, or the professional relationships, where people come with a certain idea of what they expect out as an outcome of the situation, but when it doesn't go their way, or rather, let's call it expectation management or whatever the term for it is, and that comes with a lot of bias, that comes with insecurities. So when you're looking, of course, one-on-one, there's therapy or counseling or various tools to cope with it. But I mean, how do these relationships, you kind of just have to, navigate society as a collection of relationships. And when you have all these on a micro level, I don't know if what the question is. Is it how do you resolve it, or why does it happen? Because if the idea is to find companionship and just to be with someone, of course, who understands you, who you can lay yourself bare to, why are we in such a complex struggle when it comes to understanding our fellow human being?
It stems from multiple things. It stems from, one, not understanding how each person communicates, not understanding the wiring, that we are wired differently, men and women. Women typically communicate from an emotional standpoint. Men communicate from almost a logical standpoint. They really want to explain and analyze things. Women want to speak from, this is how whatever you did makes me feel, or this is how I feel about the situation. And based on that feelings, this is how I'm thinking, or this is how I'm going to approach this matter. So I think fundamentally, when we don't have that knowledge that women communicate differently, men communicate in another way, we come into the relationship expecting that the way I see it is the way that you should see it.
Right.
And when we don't see it that way, here comes an argument. Here comes a conflict, because we are seeing it from totally two pages. But if we understand that she's going to see it most likely from an emotional standpoint, then that means I need to back off. That means if she's communicating from an emotional standpoint and I'm communicating from logical, we are on two totally shit of music. We are not on the same page.
Yeah.
So that means I'm gonna need to come to her world of emotions, or she's gonna need to come to my world of logic.
And that usually never happens.
That usually never happens. So that means once you recognize fundamentally we are wired differently, and also understand where the person is coming from, then that means I need to back off as a man. I need to relax because I can't bring her to a logical state of point if she's talking from her emotions or talking from anger, right? I can't bring that into my own world. The only way I bring that into logic is when she's fully calmed down, because that's when she can really understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah. But many of
Right?
us don't have the patience to wait that out, right? It's you have to sort of say something in that moment, right?
Right. So we don't have the tools on how to navigate such discord. Okay. How do I make sure that I remain calm under the situation? How do I have internal dialogue with myself, even though what I'm hearing is not what I really want to hear? Because I'm hearing something that is pissing me off. I'm hearing something that is not making me happy. So you're already having a thought process going on in your head. Your mind is spinning like that.
Yeah.
Okay. And when your mind is spinning like that, you want to act based on what your mind is telling you. So we have to be able to capture our mind, what is going on in this thought process that we are having, and what is that thought process telling me to do, telling me to say. And I have to be able to restrain myself from saying those nasty things or acting irrational. And if I can do that and take those couple of seconds and take ownership of my thoughts, then I will have an opportunity to respond other than react in that situation, and then give my partner a chance to calm down or for me to listen. I mean, there's so many levels to that, especially when you walk through counseling. There's so many levels to that to ensure that there's a smooth communication. Sometimes also listening with empathy, understanding from an empathetic standpoint, walking a mile in the other person's shoes can help us to know, okay, and now I truly understand why my wife feels this way or why my husband speaks this way. Because now you've walked a mile in their shoes. You've understood what they've gone through. And to be able to empathize also involves that the person needs to be vulnerable enough to share the backstory. Sometimes when we don't know the backstory of why someone says or acts somehow, we easily misinterpret that. And that prevents a real, true communication or effective communication because we don't know the backstory of why somebody is telling you this or why somebody is acting that way. Yeah.
No, that's something that seems like a constant effort that you have to make, right? You have to sort of, and I think that's also not that's a beautiful process, right? Because as you do it more, you have to. I mean, while it's difficult, you have to remind yourself that okay, I'm not going to react. I'm not going to react. She's coming from this place, or he's coming from this place, and then eventually, sort of, you see this place where you get to where your understanding of the person is deeper. So the next argument or the next fight or whatever you want to call it is on a, I mean, is it on a deeper level, or is it there? Because it kind of is like a constant wave of going back and forth. Like you have this idea of your relationship going to another level, to the next level, but sometimes it could go to it could go to a deeper level of love and understanding and respect, but it can also go back 10 steps to the first fight you had, which is so immature, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you have a healthy communication that you're able to resolve a conflict, it should propel you to a more deeper connection, deeper communication. But sometimes thinking about, issues that have happened in the past, if we are not careful, we can always be bringing that into the old mess, right? And then creating more deeper wounds and more deeper problems. And sometimes we've not resolved the last issue. We just brushed it off. We just, swept it under the carpet, and then a new issue now occurs. So which is now compounding your problem. So sometimes we need to get to resolving every matter, every issues, because otherwise you are adding more to it. And then by the time you've added more to it, it's like you are lifting weights. By the time you've already had 10 pounds, 20 pounds and 30 pounds, right? And eventually it gets to the point where you can't take it no more. And then you have this outburst, that you start yelling at each other or you start reacting instead of responding.
we hear a lot about this now, right? Where, of course, there's a lot of good things happening in the space when it comes to the movements that are about equality, and which I think is essentially something that needed to be addressed, and I think is being addressed now. But you have the opposite effect of also many men like apologizing for being men because, oh yeah, there was one guy who was a sexist, male, chauvinist, or an abusive guy, so I apologize because I just happen to be a man. So you hear a lot of that happening. At the same time, you hear of horrific stories where there are abusive partners. So maybe I don't think, again, because maybe you've gathered from now my questions aren't very specific. They just kind of
I mean, we're just having a conversation and
yeah,
and situations that you've experienced and we're talking about. So it's
yeah.
okay.
No, I just, yeah, because it fascinates me because all this kind of goes down to the deeper level. While we talk about individuals as an example of the human experience, it's this idea, right, where one extreme you have people who are, I mean, the horrible example of what a human being can do to another human being. But then you have this other extreme where people who haven't done anything just seem to be sort of going along this way of saying, oh, no, I apologize for every man who's existed. So there needs to be some sense we need to get out of this, right? Because it just sort of helps us as individuals and human beings going forward if we can make sense of what these things represent. So maybe, okay, I'm going to ask you a specific question. Why do people stay in abusive relationships? Why do people, abusive could be from physically abusive to even toxic relationships with another friend. I'm sure you've experienced the level of severity increases, but just the idea of it, maybe if we can talk about that.
Yeah, I think people stay in an abusive relationship for so many reasons. So many reasons. I think one is they are actually brainwashed in that relationship by their abuser that
Hmm.
might make them feel like nobody's going to want them if they leave this relationship. Nobody's going to marry you. Nobody's
Mm.
going to want to date you. You don't look good. You are ugly. You're not fine. You already have two, three kids. Nobody's gonna want a woman or a man with two or three kids, right?
Mm.
Relationship becomes hard for you after that. So they've been brainwashed to think that way. So they continue to stay in that relationship.
Right.
Two, it may be that they are not financially equipped
Mm.
to stand on their own if they leave that relationship. So they are at the mercy of the partner who is probably the breadwinner.
Right.
So, and they are staying in that relationship because they already have kids and their kids need to eat, their kids need clothes, their kids need to go to school. Somebody needs to pay for that. And in other case, is the partner who is an abuser that is paying for all those things.
Right.
Other reason could also be that they are not having enough help, encouragement around that will give them that boost
Mm.
to be confident to leave that relationship.
Right.
Another reason also be that it's almost like a disgrace for them to say they left the relationship. Now they are divorced, right?
The taboo. Right.
It's taboo, right?
Mm. Mm.
So they don't want to be part of that statistics and
Right.
people saying negative things about them. Oh, she couldn't keep a marriage, or he couldn't keep a marriage. They don't want that.
Mm.
And I think their upbringing could matter as well. The culture that they grew up or the home that they grew up. I remember like back in the days, I grew up in Nigeria, and back in the
Mm.
days, even when you get married, your parents would tell the bride, "You can't come back to this house when you get married. You
Right.
stay
Of
in your
course, you go to
husband's
your
house."
husband's house. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
That so when you make statement like that to a girl, to a woman, that means she feels like there's no other place I can run into or run to when I'm having trouble in my marriage. I need to endure whatever problem is going on.
That's terrifying, right? It's almost like this is the end. Like this chapter's done. You can't come back to it. That's very scary. Yeah.
Exactly. So such statements, it's a powerful statement that can be ringing bell in someone's ears when they are facing issues in in their marriage,
Mm.
that they need help, they are crying for help, they need to get out. But it's like, who are you going to run to? Your parents? But your parents already told you you can't come back to this house. You got to deal with what you are dealing with.
Mm.
And I also think religion, depending on what the religion is. I mean, I'm a Christian, and I
Mm.
think some some pastors or some churches don't believe in divorce.
Yeah.
And no matter what trouble and physical abuse is happening, they will tell you, just keep praying, keep enduring it. God hates divorce, so don't get divorced, right? So
Ouch.
some people
Mm.
under that religion principles and believe, and the church that they attend under, what pastors that they are under, it makes them stay in relationship like that, it can lead to death. And it's unfortunate, it's happening. So there's so many reasons people stay in abusive relationship.
And I want to go beyond the individual relationship of a couple, of a husband or a wife and or a girlfriend, a boyfriend, or whatever the arrangement is, and talk about something which scares me a lot more. Um, I mean, when I say scares me, it's because it's this idea of what it represents going forward for society and maybe humanity at large, is this idea of the group behavior, right? When we look at whether it's the mob, whether it's the mob mentality of what a group can be convinced to do. And you mentioned that word, which is brainwashing, either through religious extremist groups or through these cults where people run to when they're in either an abusive relationship, or they don't have an idea of family, or they have nowhere to go. They kind of get sucked into these things. And we've heard plenty and more examples over the years, with so-called spiritual cults, or you look at these other things which coming in the news right now, people being arrested for these things they mislead people into believing, these pyramid schemes or whatever the word they use to sort of sell to people. Why is you mentioned the idea of brainwashing, and that probably could be applied to a larger thing, but why are more and more are we seeing people giving up their entire identity of the complexity that makes them a human being for one aspect, whether it's political, whether it's religious, or whether it's one side of what is being celebrated, and completely for being overtaken by that philosophy which they're selling or being sold and buying into that. We're seeing more of that. So I'm just, I mean, that's what scares me. Like, why is it so easy to sort of take an entire group and convince them to do something which they wouldn't do as an individual? And this could be from the school level, where you have a group of bullies that sort of one person spearheads, or it could be a terrorist organization, or it could be a religious organization that does good, or whatever it may be, right? So maybe can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think people are looking for a sense of belonging, and being part of a community and being part of a movement.
Mm.
People that can identify with my values, with my ideals. And, no matter how crazy it is, this might sound, I think there is always someone who thinks like you out there.
Mm.
And there is joy we have when you find somebody who thinks like you, who has the same visions, or who have the same goals. It's
Yeah.
like meeting a friend for the first time. It's like, wow, you believe in this thing? Oh, you
I'm
think
not
like this?
alone.
Like you are not alone. You
Yeah,
are
yeah.
excited. It's like, man, I can't wait to talk to this person again, right? I can't wait to see you again. I think that is what is shaping us as human beings. That we have
Mm.
all these ideas going on in our minds, and when we find somebody who shares the same thoughts, the same views, we easily click and we
Right.
want to belong. So that's why I believe is the existence of all these groups to some
Mm.
extent. And of course, the evil thoughts and things of that nature happens. Someone just wants to do evil, or having a sense of control. It's
Mm.
like, oh, United States can be the most powerful country. Okay, North, I'm in North Korea. I'm the president of North Korea, prime minister, and I want to run my own thing. I don't want somebody dictating I should be running my own country, right? So I
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
have my own power. I want to exercise my power. And then from that, they start speaking to people who share the same ideas, the same ideals, and the same vision. And they have that, movement going on. And I also think that on the other side, we are being, we are neglecting our sense of independent thinking.
Mm.
We are not thinking independently. We are thinking codependently with other people.
Would you call
And
that
when we are,
conditionally also, maybe?
it's conditioned. Yeah,
Right,
it's
right.
conditioned. It's absolute condition. It's you can definitely condition someone to think the way you want them to think.
Mm.
Right? You can sway their thinking. If you take some things from them or things that you think they really need, you can definitely condition them. So we don't have that independence thinking or to be even challenge what we are being told,
Mm.
even from childhood. From childhood, challenging what your parents are telling you. You got to get to the point where you become an adult and like, my dad told me this 10, 15 years ago. Is that really true?
Yeah.
Or maybe it was only true at that point in time, but this time around is no longer relevant. So I need
Mm.
to unlearn what I've been told so that I can relearn new information. Okay, I was naive then, but I shouldn't be naive anymore. I didn't know then, but new information has come out. So I
Yeah.
need to try some
I need to update
things.
the software. Yeah.
I need to update the software,
Yeah, yeah.
right? I can't be operating on Windows 97 anymore, right? So I
Yeah.
got to change. There's a new research, so we have to be educated. We have to be
Mm.
educated so that we are not misinformed. So I think people are not exercising their independence intellectually and challenging what culture or what traditions may be or what they are being fed. And say, does it really make sense? Like the story of, you know, people dying for Islamic religion as far as the suicide bombers, right?
ISIS or Al
So
Qaeda.
the
Yeah, yeah,
ISIS
yeah.
or Al Qaeda, things of that nature, and they are being told and being brainwashed that, oh, when you get to heaven, you're gonna have six virgins, seven virgins.
Mm.
Okay, it's like, why do you want to kill yourself for seven virgins? Why can't you have seven virgins right here on the earth? Why must
Yeah.
somebody tell you
Yes.
that, why
Not that
can't you
easy,
get to
doctor.
heaven? You know what I'm saying? And the
Yeah.
person telling you, don't they want seven virgins too? So why can't they go commit,
Yeah.
that suicide, right? Go on that societal mission, so it's
Maybe
people
someone
are,
tried. Maybe someone tried convincing logically as a man 72 virgins, but then said, you know what? It's easy blowing yourself up.
you know,
I don't know. I'm just speculating. Maybe some guy said, I spoke to 72 of them. None of them agreed. Blow me up.
now I'm guaranteed that when I get to heaven, there's this other 72 waiting, and they're not gonna deny me.
We already
You
met you.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah. Yeah.
mean, it's one of those things
Yeah.
that you tend to it's interesting, but I think
Yeah.
we need to get to the point where we are challenging what we are being fed.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I don't know if you followed this court case, which I don't know if it's still going on, but there's that entire group called Nexium. Did you ever hear about that story?
No, not at all.
So I think it's one of those things which started out as by this guy. I think his name is Keith something in America, and he basically had a bunch of powerful, women who had a lot of inheritance. I think it's a couple of those daughters from the Seagrams family. They kind of bought into his idea, and they would recruit women to be sort of these marketing kind of these programs which would help you in marketing, being a better version of how to market yourself, kind of thing. That, and then that would escalate where then they would have a mentor, and then the next thing you know, they sort of sold into this. I wouldn't call it a sex trafficking thing, but they almost became a sex slave to this this guy, and these aren't women who were abducted from their family and taken away against their will. These were willing, educated, so-called, I mean, educated in the sense they would have a college degree. But then the next thing you know, like a couple of them escaped from it, and they sort of did a podcast which led, of course, to this story being unraveled and revealed into the public, and how this man would actually, in fact, some of the women would get branded by this hot iron thing, saying that he's a property, they're a property of him. So, as you just mentioned, it's education, like understanding, but education, people just think stops at school or college where you understand the subject you're studying, but it's actual challenging the system of how you think, maybe, that is so important, which people are scared to do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people are scared to do that. And to some extent, I think people want to, people are idolizing other folks that they think they are on the higher level or on a pedestal, or they've achieved so many other things that they have not achieved or they are looking forward to achieve. So when you start idolizing people, you start glorifying them, you start having a mentor that you believe so much about what that mentor is telling you, then you can easily succumb to whatever directions that they give you. Okay,
Yeah.
because ultimately you also want to become like them one day. You want to have the level of success and achievement. And I think that's from what you are saying, it's almost in sync with what I'm saying, because it's like this guy or leader has found a weakness of these women that, okay, they're not well to do, but I'm going to bring them from the lower level that they are in. I'm going to touch them up, I'm going to make them look good. They're going to be financially well trained and financially equipped. And it's like I'm taking them from their low point to the point where they can see themselves happy and feeling good, and they've achieved something. And if someone has helped you to do that, natural mindset will be like, wow, I need to worship this person. I need to be thankful to this person. I need to listen to this person. Okay, this is my hero, or this is my shiro. So from that point, you have already been controlled because they've already captured you. You've
You feel
already
indebted to them. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you exactly. So I think that's the process that some of these people go through, where they find someone's weakness, help them in one way or the other, and then that person uh their puppet in a sense.
I'm going to flip it around and just ask you this before we wind up. And okay, say for instance, there's a collective, a community, or even a cult, right? But the cult isn't doing anything like bombing people for their religious ideology or their political ideology or their agenda. But they kind of, yeah, the person who started it, or the committee or the group that started it, do manipulate people, do brainwash them. But the people who have been brainwashed are happy, in the sense, whatever happiness they define it by. They have a sense of purpose, and their purpose may be, let's clean up beaches of plastic. But it's not good because they're brainwashing them to do that. Is it always bad to have this way of thinking?
When we use the word brainwash, it has that negative connotation.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately it's not about brainwash, especially if it's to achieve a positive purpose. Because I think they are all, if it's done in the right way, I believe they are all being educated. Everyone is
Yeah.
being educated somehow, right?
Yeah.
We are
Yeah.
being given some type of information. So it is left to us to believe in that information and to use that information either for a greater cause or for a bad cause. So I think if they are using it for a greater cause, it's not really, it might not be brainwashing, right? It may just be that they are educating them and they are giving them the process or the way that they should carry themselves to be able to accomplish this goal. And in some other cases, they might be brainwashed, right, to achieve, a common goal that at the end might be good. So it can, but we cannot generalize it.
I like what you just said, because if you do it for a negative thing, it's called brainwashing. But if you do it, repeatedly for millions of years positively, it's called education, right? You drill it in hard enough and long enough that everyone believes into this this construct, right? Yeah, what is good, what is bad, what is success, what is failure. My God, that's now. I'm fascinated, Doctor, by the line and the field of work that you kind of have spent your the years coming till now and going forward doing. And thank you so much for sharing. But can I just, before we sort of say goodbye today, what inspired you to take this path? What was your reason for kind of taking up something like this?
It's quite interesting when people ask me that question, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, I've thought about it so many times. You know, what should be that kind of response, and I've always given one response to many interviews, but I think I'm getting to the point where I'm not. I don't think the response that I give is not good. It's great. It's true,
Mm.
but I also feel like that response is not uh, the greatest, in my own opinion.
Okay.
And I will tell you that response, and I will tell you what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
The response that I normally give is I've had my own personal story. I've had my own personal journey. Um, I was doing. Back in the days, I used to throw parties to galvanize people, to
Mm-hmm.
connect, and throwing parties definitely will expose you to many women. Because
Mm.
you want women to come to your party,
Yeah.
and from there you have to kind of date those women to some extent.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You want to keep them, feel like, yeah, I know this guy, I'm connected to this guy. So I've been exposed to different women and things of that nature, and being a playboy and that gone into that route. But there was one day I went to a friend's party, and this guy was a notorious player,
Mm.
and I saw him speaking to a girl that he just met, and within a few minutes they exchanged numbers, and something just struck inside of me emotionally that months later or a few weeks later, this girl is going to be crying. She's going to be calling her friends. They're going to sit around, gather around, and be giving her tissue to wipe her tears. And all she's going to be saying to her friends is, this guy played me. I did
Mm.
not believe that this guy was going to play me. And I had that thought process, and I said, you know what? I feel I'm sympathetic, but at the same time, I want to do something to help women. So on my way home that night, I said to myself, I'm going to start a podcast where I start to share the games that men play so that women are not being played and
We
women are
started giving up
armed
our
with the
tricks.
information. Exactly, giving up, the men's tricks,
Yeah.
but then the show evolved to the point where I'm now giving information to both men and women
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
help them to cultivate a good relationship. So that's pretty much the story that I tell people, that this is how I started.
Yeah.
Now, it's a good story, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's. I
Yeah,
mean, it
it's a
makes
good
sense
reason.
because you wanted to go beyond what you were.
Right.
Yeah.
And to show a change, transformation of, okay, this is who he was, this is how he changed, and there was a story that struck that, that
Yeah.
happened that made him to change. So, which is good. It's good for the public to hear that. But the part where, this is the first time I'm going to share that, this is my response now. If
Yeah.
someone were to ask me, why do you do what you do?
Yeah.
It's beyond me. I don't have control over that. I don't know why I do that. It's a dream that captures me. This is what fills my heart. I shouldn't have a story to tell to explain what my passion is.
Mm.
To explain, because I don't develop my passion. I didn't develop my dream. I didn't develop this purpose. It came by itself. There is a higher power that controls their feelings. It's like saying a dream. I had a dream yesterday. No, that's the message. I had a dream yesterday. You did not have a dream yesterday. The dream had you. There's no way you can conceive such a dream. Dream have people. You just go to sleep and something happens. So in the same way, if I'm living my life in this purpose, it's not something that I created. It's something that was born in me, that I was born for this purpose. I could have, and then I discover it, yes, but I was born for this. So why you do this? I was born for it. That's the reason why. I discovered it, it's a different case. But why you do what you do? I was born to do this.
I like the second story. I mean, I like what you just told me, because we're so, even in this idea of purpose, right? I'm sure you keep hearing people going, pursue your passion. But everything's approached with a logical thing. There's a step, there's goals. But this just seemed like, what you just said seemed like there's no explanation, which I like. There's no explanation of why you're doing it. It just comes to you, right?
Yeah. And I feel like I've been living my life, and most people have been living their life because they have been taught when you do whatever you want to do, you must have a reason, and you must be able to articulate it, and you must be able to share that,
rationalize it.
Rationalize it, and I've done so many podcasts, and I'm like, okay, is this the right thing? But I get to the point where I'm challenging my thoughts. I'm like, no, I don't want to go that down road anymore, because I've found something that I'm like, why should you be able to explain that? Something that makes you happy, that makes you alive. You can't explain that. You can't explain that.
Yeah, it's brilliant to hear that. I like what you just told me, because it's more, of course, it's the first story. I mean, the one you've been telling people is great and makes sense, but this leaves me with a sense of mystery, a sense of there is a meaning beyond the meaning that we're taught to believe, if that makes any sense. And that's the true human experience, right? Which we don't have, which we can't put on a resume or a YouTube channel, which we can't put in a bio, which we can't put in a profile. There is something beyond the construct of, like, say, Dr. Femi and Dr. Sandeep that we are selling to the world. I think the true, authentic experience is what you are feeling that drives you to do what you do, without an explanation in words or an explanation in the terms that we're taught to believe in.
Absolutely. You can wake me up in the middle of the night and ask me about relationship challenges, and I will give you an answer. I don't need to read books to give you that, right? And I've been like that for many years. So where is that knowledge coming from? I didn't manufacture that. I didn't fabricate it. It's coming from a source that is beyond me. I can't control it. It's just there. So that's just what it is.
No, it's brilliant. Now, can I ask you one thing before we wind up? Is you said you're from Nigeria? I'm assuming. Are you from Lagos?
Not really. But when I go back home now, I typically stay in Lagos. I'm from a place called Ibadan, which is by about like 45 minutes, an hour drive from Lagos, or an hour 30 minutes stop.
Okay, because I was reading something about how there's this massive because I remember, many years back, I think 2003, when I was in university, I lived for a couple of years in the UK, and my roommate, his father used to work for Shell, and he was telling me how he used to visit his dad. They lived in these kind of compounds which were guarded, and there was this huge disparity, right? In Lagos, they had the president's compound where there was so much opulence and wealth, and then you have on the streets, you had this disparity. And now, of course, there's been a big influx of money, and the whole I read somewhere there was this massive development outside Lagos where you have these high rises, these fancy villas, and that seems to be the trend around the world, where in certain countries the disparity sort of widens. And I think I wanted to ask you your perspective on coming from Nigeria to America for two reasons, right? One is, how you received as an African from Africa in America, with the story kind of which people believe that Africa is this place where there's still lions kind of, next to your front door, or whatever it may be, right? To this idea of course, there's been development, but there's also maybe been unbalanced development in countries like India and Africa. To this idea of, since you're looking at relationships and conflict, how do you, as an African, look at the entire African American struggle?
You know, growing up in Nigeria has um, given me a different view of what Nigeria is, because that's all I knew at that
Mm,
time. And at the same time, I've seen the rich, the wealthy versus the poor. And fortunately, I grew up in a middle class uh, family.
mm,
We're not lacking, lacking a lot. We had
mm,
so many things. We had cars, we had a house that my parents built. I even had my own room. I had my
mm.
own room, I had my own bathroom growing up.
Yeah.
But when I came to America, things changed. Actually, I didn't have my own room. I didn't have my own bathroom. When I came to America as a teenager, I was sleeping in my parents' um, couch. I was sleeping on the couch as a teenager. I had to share um, one bathroom with three other family members. And during winter, my hope is that they don't use all the hot water, because otherwise I won't have the hot water to use. So it's like I went from a middle class in Nigeria, having my own bathroom,
Yeah.
to living as a poor man in America, and
Mm,
going through those humble beginnings. So it's like starting all over, um, in America. And I'm grateful that where I started, because there has been a major shift to where I am now, right?
yeah.
So where, people say, if you can work hard, you can achieve the American dream. And I believe that's been my story as well. But I think it's not just American dream. I'm achieving the dream for myself
Yeah.
that I set out to achieve, and God's dreams as well for me. So it's beyond just American dream. So that, it's coming to this country as given me the world view now, because you
Mm,
have the Western world, and then you have the more of so-called non-Western world living in Nigeria. You want to call it the
mm,
Eastern part of the world. So it's like two different worlds that I'm now in the middle, and I'm struggling in the sense of which values, which ideals do I employ into my life? Is it the
mm,
one that I grew up with, being taught with my culture, or is it the one that I'm seeing now that it's quite different? It's more like it opens your mind to think differently, and to challenge everything that you've been taught and you've been told, by your cultures and traditions. So sometimes I get into conflict, with myself,
mm,
and I have two kids
mm,
that I, I was telling somebody this. I said, people who come from Africa and have their kids in this American system, they are the one who struggle the most,
mm.
because you've been brought up with one idea.
Yeah.
Now you have two ideas you are operating on,
Yeah.
and your kids are only operating on one idea, which is American idea.
Yeah.
So now you are struggling. Do I raise them in American way, or do I raise them in African
Yeah.
way?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So you are combating and say, okay, which one is better? Should I choose one over the other? Should I
Yeah.
just 100% go to one, or balance it? In some situations, I apply the American way, or in some situations, I apply the African way. So you are conflicted. Like, let me give you a scenario that happened recently.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a person that loves to grow. I love personal development,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't see my kids as just kids. I see that they are placed in my life so that I could learn from them as well, just like they are learning from me.
Mm-hmm.
And I raised my kids to, if they are opening if I open the doors for them, they're supposed to say thank you for
Yeah.
for, for that kind of gesture.
Yeah.
So recently, I um, went to a store to buy ice cream for my kids, and I have a 10-year-old daughter and a 5-year-old son.
Oh,
A
nice.
9-year-old daughter, sorry, a 9-year-old daughter and a 5-year-old son, soon to be
Mm-hmm.
6. So I, as soon as we're done at the ice cream place, my son held the door for me. And as I came out, I didn't say anything. And he said, "What do you say?" He asked me that. What do you say? And automatically I said, "Oh, thank you, son." And my daughter said to him, "You don't talk to daddy like that. That's disrespectful." And I'm like, "Wait a minute. That can't be true." You know,
Yeah.
that's disrespectful. Like, you're not supposed to talk to daddy that way, right? You're not supposed to say, "What do you say?" But in my head now, I'm now conflicted. When he said it at first, I didn't think anything out of it. I didn't think it was disrespectful. I just thought about it being that I'm at wrong. I'm supposed to be saying thank you to him
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
I raised him like that. And basically, these kids only repeat what you share with them because
Yeah.
he repeated what I would have said if I were the one holding the door for him and if he doesn't say thank you. So they don't now think about some things parents may say to you, but not meaning that you can say the same thing back to your parents.
Mm.
It has to be formulated in a different way. You can't just say to me, "So what do you say?" Right now, that's the African way of thinking of like, no, that
Yeah.
sounds disrespectful. But American way is like,
You
I'm
get,
asking you that, what do you say?
you heard what you
It's
just,
like
yeah, you heard basically, he repeated what he heard, yeah.
he
Or rather,
repeated
and you
what he heard.
liked, and you wanted him to do that, right? Which is, I mean, you want him to get that value of, I mean, it's in a way respect, right? It's in a way respect what I did for you, but yeah, the Indian or the African tradition would be like, you don't speak to your elders like that. Yeah.
So it's one of those things that, okay, wait a minute, now I'm conflicted.
Yeah.
So how do I go about explaining to him and say, okay, you know what? Yes, I know I might have said that in the past and you learned it from me, but you can't say that back to me because you have an African parent, not an
Uh,
American parent.
and he's probably, yeah,
So
they're
this,
probably going to grow up going, you know what? And it's confusing, right? Because even for your kids, or maybe
yes,
not just your kids, but for kids growing up with this kind of not conflict, confusion, is like they probably are like sometimes which side or which parent within my parent is going to respond. Is it the American parent in my dad or the African parent in my dad who's going to respond to the situation, right? So then they have to kind of like, oh my God, which one's going to, like, one's going to be rational, the other one's going to be more emotional. So it's, yeah, it's a bit interesting for them as well.
yes, it is really rough for them as well because they
Mm.
have to constantly be thinking, how do I say something to my dad? How do I ask my dad a question? Okay, he's an African man in America, so I gotta now think in an African way, right?
Yeah.
Not think in an American way, even though they may be with their friends, with their American friends, but how they're gonna talk to me has to change because I'm wired to think in an African way. I grew up in an African way, so it's a difficult and challenging one for somebody who grew up in Africa and then now learning the American culture and raising kids in America and trying to balance that. Okay, which method should I apply in this situation? So that I'm not even confusing these kids, so that I'm being logical as well. It doesn't even matter. Am I even, why am I fuzzing about this for? Is it necessary, to be fuzzing about? He didn't say it in a way that may sound respectful in an
Yeah.
African way. Whereas in an American culture, it's not a disrespect. It's just, the way that he's showing you that, Dad, you're not being kind. You're not showing respect, to somebody as well. So it's. I hope I answer your question.
No, no, it's absolutely, yeah. No, I mean, it's something that, as you said, right? Yeah, it makes their life interesting. Maybe sometimes a bit of a balancing act. But no, I love this idea that, because as I told you at the beginning of the conversation, when we first started, I have a 4-month-old baby, and this fascinates me with children, right? Like you're kind of even there told that there's a certain way that you have to be as a parent, as a father, as the role you play, the certain values. But what you just told me is that every day is a lesson which is something that you don't have to study, that's something you don't have to learn when it comes to the conventional way, but life itself gives you these examples that you can kind of use for your children, for yourself, and you can learn from them, they can learn from you. And I think it's great to hear that from you, and since most of your life is spent understanding relationships, I like hearing this idea of growth, and growth not always being the most comfortable, positive thing, but also being something that it doesn't have to be instructed through a classroom or a lecture or a thing. It can be understood through the best sort of lesson, which is life, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, and we can always learn from anybody, no matter how old or how young they are. You know, we always learn. And my mantra is that the largest room in life is improvement. The moment you stop learning, it's the minute you um, start becoming irrelevant to the people around you. You know, that's my mantra, that's my quote, and my life has been designed to improvement. Just learn and become a better person each day.
Lovely. No, I think that's such a great thing to live by. And thank you for sharing all of that, Dr. Femi. I really appreciate you being here with me this evening, for you, and for staying up and doing this. And can you tell people where they can head to check out your podcast or your programs or the work you do?
Yeah, absolutely. The easiest way is I typically have a lot of things posted on social media. Just go on Instagram at GFemSpeaks, at GFemSpeaks. And if you just want to get a little bit of the courses that I offer in relationship, you can go to theimprovementuniversity.com, theimprovementuniversity.com.
Lovely. And what was your handle? I didn't get that. At what? At G?
GFem, G F
Uh-huh.
as in Frank, EM,
Oh,
and then
GFem.
speaks. Yeah,
Okay.
GFem speaks.
At GFem Speaks. Okay. Fantastic. Yeah, good luck with everything. And I hope a lot more doors open and you thank them for keeping them open.
Absolutely. 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 Yes. That's a lesson learned from that. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Femi. Do stay in touch and hope to meet you soon.
Absolutely. Take care.
Take care.